Okay, so it's 11 now, so I think we'll get going. So thanks everybody for coming along. We are recording the webinar, so please do turn off your video if you don't want to be on the recording, but if you're happy to be, that's absolutely fine. If you could mute yourself whilst we're presenting, but we will have questions and a discussion after we've finished, and we're quite happy to answer questions about anything that we've talked about today, or indeed you have any queries about CSI in general. If you've only just started, or if you've been going on for a long time, you have a question, that's absolutely fine. So we'll have a nice little discussion afterwards. So I will hand over to Simon. He's going to start us off.
Hello everyone. Right, I'll try and share my screen. That one, I think. Can you see a manual handling assessment thing? No. Can you see the presentation?
Yes. See the presentation.
Excellent. Always confuses me.
Yeah.
That can go out. Well, no, I better not shut that. And I'll go into presentation mode. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming along. Apologies for a start, because I've really put this together very quickly. It's been really madly busy the last couple of days. But what's quite interesting is I did a presentation back in September, which was a kind of a forward look for CSI, and featured the scorecards heavily, and I'm pleased to say that we're pretty much on track, and things have transpired much as we hoped they had. I hoped they would. So so I've pinched bits out of that. For a lot of you wouldn't have seen that one anyway, this will be all relevant stuff. So yeah, let's get started. I think if I press that. So we spent a lot of the last couple of years, if any of you have looked at the Catchment Data Explorer on the Environment Agency, we use that a lot. It's a website that kind of summarises the status, according to the Environment Agency, of all the water bodies in the Westcountry. And back in the day, they used to update it every year, and then it went to every 2 years, and the 2016 ones were launched, and 2017 came, and 2018 came and went, and 2019 came and went, and still no update. And of course, we were all getting a bit anxious about what the Environment Agency were doing. And in 2020, I think, or was it late in 2019, they released the 2019 Water Framework Directive classifications, long awaited, and it was pretty bad news. You know, the whole point of the Water Framework Directive is to kind of restore our water bodies to good ecological health by originally 2020, I think, and then they pushed that back to 2027. And actually, things had got worse, essentially. And so it really kind of prompted, with our CSI scheme, it prompted a rethink about how we could make the whole scheme more useful. And also, when we started looking into the data behind the WFD assessments, found there wasn't very much of it. And that prompted, amongst other things, me delving into the Environment Agency data, which is all open, all available online to download, to see what was there. And so I've done some work, and this is for Devon and Cornwall. This graph shows the number of samples of key tests. So we've picked on temperature, conductivity, turbidity, suspended solids, and orthophosphate, all across Devon and Cornwall in the years 2013 to 2020. And I also looked back at the year 2000. Obviously, 2020 was curtailed because of the COVID pandemic. Monitoring basically stopped in March. But you can see anyway, as a year-on-year decline in sampling by number of samples taken. What is behind that is twofold. One is they gradually, and sometimes in large steps, reduced the number of sites sampled, and they also went down over time from the idea of doing 12 samples a month at each site down to, in some cases, only 2 or 3 samples per year at each site. So that's what's got us to the point in 2019 anyway, where we were at, you know, about a third of the level of sampling that was being done in 2000. I've then looked at that on a bit more of a regional zoom in. So this is the North Devon management catchment. Now just looking at phosphate tests, because as you can see from the previous graph, phosphate is pretty much the most numerous test done by sample number. And so you can see again, you know, the picture in 2000 was, what's that, 1,400 and odd tests done at 122 different sites and an average of 12 a year. By 2019 even, that was down to 44 tests done at 15 unique sites and an average of 3 a year. And so the highlighted yellow, you can just about see the pink dots there on the yellow water bodies. So, you know, they are, by that stage, only really sampling a very small fraction of the catchment area. Just in case North Devon was a blip, because they all do it a bit differently, we looked at Tamar, and that's a very similar picture. You know, from 1,100, nearly 1,200 tests done in 2000 at 100 sites, and again an average of 12 a site. By 2019, that was down to just 63 sites, 63 samples done at 21 sites. So again, 3 samples a year, which any of you who've spent time monitoring rivers will know, you know, three bottles filled in a year is not really a very useful way of characterizing how our rivers are doing. So at the same time then, just to recap, we still are talking to a national group led by the Rivers Trusts, looking at how we can bring some of the third party or the volunteer monitoring knowledge and know-how that exists in other parts of the world to the UK and to England, I suppose. And they highlighted a number of things where we could maybe, well, these things are common in sort of established volunteer monitoring schemes, I suppose. And so these are some things that gave us food for thought and how we might adapt the CSI scheme. And we decided that actually at that time we weren't being particularly prescriptive about where or when people would sample. And so since last summer, I think we've been a bit more, you know, any recent signups will find that you get sites suggested for you, and we really do try and encourage sampling monthly. And really this was with, you know, we have in mind kind of filling the gaps, I suppose, where the Environment Agency monitoring isn't happening anymore, because they'd already dropped. So if you look at the map that shows all the water bodies, I think there's something like 850 something in there. A lot of those small coastal ones were kind of disappeared by the Environment Agency. In 2014, they stopped being sampled under Water Framework Directive, which is the scheme under which they monitor the water quality and the ecology and the plants and the fish. So the comprehensive sort of state of the environment monitoring is done under the Water Framework Directive, or was. And so that wasn't being done in a lot of places. And with your help, you know, we have the ambition to cover all of those 850 water bodies, because no matter how degraded or impoverished any river anywhere is always going to be a potential home for lots of wildlife. You know, they're really important habitats and really important connecting features in our landscape. So we think every single one of them is worth looking after. There we go. So we started looking at how we could better use that data. It's been, you know, it's well established now that people who sign up to volunteer and monitoring schemes want to know what's happening with the data. And we were collecting a lot of data. We didn't really have a very concise vehicle, if you like, for collating that data and for interpreting it and passing it on to others who can use it in their decision making. So we looked again at some examples from the USA of different ways people summarize the data in these report cards. And if you look down through these, they're doing very similar testing to what we're doing, and you know, making their own kind of these are all different, essentially different assessment criteria and different assessment schemes. But so if we just go back, you know, so we glanced through a few of these, or pulled over a few of these and picked the best bits. And I really like the kind of the grade wheel, if you like, that we got from the Upper Potomac one. And so looking at the data we were collecting, we started to think how we could turn that into turn those numbers into a grade that would be kind of applicable right across the region. And we first hit on this idea of using the water quality, so that's the phosphate measure, the suspended sediment that you do from the turbidity, the dissolved solids, and a pollution score based on the comment or the boxes that you tick in there. And then we also thought, well, there's really good useful data in the wildlife and problem planet section as well, so we can add that in. So we sort of set off then really crunching the numbers on what data we had gathered for 2020. In actual fact, I did look back at some of the previous, some sites have been going, really comprehensively since 2018 and even before. So we were able to compare just quickly, mashing up the numbers, if you like, how some places had changed over time, and same with some other ones. This was really kind of early sense checking to see if we had the levels right, because there's no manual for doing this. A lot of the methods we're using aren't currently done, and so we thought we were onto something, and then we set about kind of working out exactly how we could apply this in a mathematical way that didn't require too much work, sort of hydraulically, and not automated it, but made the whole thing consistent and applicable in a kind of Excel spreadsheet way. So it's kind of do it once and the numbers get churned out, and we deal with that. So for total to solid, well, basically for all the parameters, really, we had to then establish a way of saying, what is good, what is bad, and where are the lines drawn between them. Now, for dissolved solids, we'd already done some of that work, because when you look at the maps on Cartographer, you'll see this kind of legend, which is roughly, how we, broadly speaking, how we categorize the TDS results you'll get, because obviously people wanted to know how their results stacked up against others. It's not an exact science, because dissolved solids is a very general measure of water quality. So you might have something deadly in the river, some toxin or some pesticide that wipes out everything and doesn't register at all on dissolved solids. Similarly, we have some rivers where there's quite high levels of dissolved solids from either background geology or from chronic kind of discharges, where actually its toxicity isn't that high. But nonetheless, we thought we'd had this scheme, and so essentially what you're seeing here is just what I did, plotting a linear relationship, or the first line I plotted was the grey one in this case, which was kind of the thresholds we'd already sort of decided on for the legend on the Cartographer map, and then I essentially put a line of best fit through that could calculate a formula, and then we can apply that formula to the results from the surveys. And so the same sort of process was followed for turbidity, except that in turbidity, when measuring turbidity, and you'll have noticed this probably on your surveys, this line here down the bottom is a recording from one of our turbidity sensors. So this is sat in a river. This is, I think, in the River Torridge. In 2017, we deployed it for a while. These are very expensive. We don't have very many of them. And you can see how turbidity behaves. You'll have a long time where it's nothing. Well, not nothing, but less than 12 on our score and very low on the sensor, and then you'll have these peaks where it's just all of a sudden shoots up due to some most often soil runoff or some kind of runoff from the landscape, but sometimes those are pollution events, and in the Torridge we were looking for discharges or washings from a quarry, and that you could clearly see in that data spikes in turbidity that weren't related to rainfall. So what I'm getting at is it's not appropriate to use the linear scale for turbidity. Instead, we use a logarithmic one, because these peaks, they may only occur for a very short duration, but they are important, and they need to be weighted higher than the long periods of clear water, which aren't influenced by rainfall. But again, we took that result and put it up against first an approximation of what was deemed good or bad, and then fitted that to the numbers we get out the turbidity tube, and then eventually we spit out this formula, which is then used in future calculations. And phosphate is a similarly kind of episodic thing. It gets flushed off in rainfall events often, but it's not quite so episodic as turbidity because there are constant sources around there. So again, it needed a slightly different approach. We also had with phosphate, the new Water Framework Directive classifications are quite complicated in that the sort of allowable level of phosphate at any river, at any location, depends on its altitude and the alkalinity. So you can't say in a blank, under Water Framework Directive, you can't say a blanket, you know, this level of phosphate is good, bad or middling. So I went back to the system the Environment Agency used before Water Framework Directive came in. So this was before 2000, which was called the General Quality Assessment, and had some really useful stuff. The interesting thing about phosphate is, so the units here we're looking at is milligrams per litre. And as you can see, even so, if you translate that into ppb, which we measure in, I think we're already looking at anything, you know, even very low is, so as soon as you can detect stuff with our tests, basically you're above very low. I think actually high, because I think level 4 there, over 0.1 milligram per litre would be 100 ppb. So again, that influenced how we shifted the grading on our phosphate, because even if you're recording 0 phosphate, it's almost impossible to say that your site is very good, is excellent for phosphate, because you could be recording, you know, 50 ppb, which is above the level for the Environment Agency, but still undetectable by our sensors. Then we also looked at the more sort of observational elements on the survey form. So you'll be all familiar with these categories. These were new for 2020. We changed them slightly, but we, again, going just based on our experience of river systems and referring back to some of the Environment Agency's previous assessments, where they used to do what they call an aesthetic assessment of river sites. And we've given scores to all of these pollution sources. So you'll see there, you know, an outfall causing odour is going to score highly because that's never going to be good. Other, you know, moderately high scores are outfalls causing discoloration. That can sometimes just be kind of maybe sediment from a different part of a. I've often seen if someone's doing some building work in a catchment in a town, sometimes that can drain, and it's not good, but it's not quite on the level of the organic pollution that is indicated by the odour. Farm runoff, slurry and silage, obviously that's quite serious, as is grey water misconnections. And then you go down the scale, so things like road runoff and an inactive outfall score quite low. We've also then, on the evidence of recent pollution, done a similar sort of thing, and some of it's a bit of a judgment call, but nonetheless, I think, you know, pretty much we agreed within Westcountry Rivers Trust that these were our best estimates for a general indication of how damaging these pollution sources would be. Now, in the Environment Agency's GQA, they rated these things, so sewage fungus, that you didn't just get one score. You had a matrix that just, you know, would ask you how thick it was and how much of the river channel it covered. But obviously, when we're trying to gather all that information on our form, I don't think it's going to be feasible at the moment to break these down and give each one a quantitative score or qualitative score. So we've gone for one number for each. And then all this data, then I'll show you in a minute how, but it gets put into that scorecard grade that we saw before. I suppose the thing to point out here is that more than ever before now, it really puts the onus on us to try and make sure that everyone is recording these things consistently. So hopefully our support materials can kind of make it clear, although it's quite difficult to describe, you know, farm runoff in a single picture or in just a few words. It's there's a whole scale of things that include that. I think the one thing I would say now is that sometimes I see surveys where the photographs show that the water's clear, but I'm seeing people are reporting soil runoff, or sometimes even when the water's murky, they're reporting soil runoff with no obvious source. So things like the soil runoff and the farm runoff, the idea is that you can see that source active on that day, you know, when you're there, not to kind of infer what's going on by what you think is in the water. We'll pick up that if it's turbidity, if something's causing turbidity, we'll pick that up in the turbidity data. But if the source isn't there, but is somewhere upstream, then we don't really want you to infer that there's a source of X, Y, or Z. Just record what you see. And if you have any questions, put a little comment in the notes, and we can kind of QC that when we go through and do the approvals. Then the other one, and this was quite good fun, was we sort of consulted with our Nicola, who's our chief ecologist, because I'd put all these things on the form years ago now, with a vague notion that they were useful. But of course, as it turns out, I'm a water quality expert. Remember that these wildlife species are the key ones that indicate the health of our watercourses in large extent. So it's really good to run that past our ecologist Nicola and see what she thought about scoring them relative to each other. And again, it's kind of difficult to do, but we're dealing with kind of generalizations here, and that's where we got to now. You will have noticed in the current form, and this was partly on Nicola's recommendation, that we've added back in a dipper. I think we did have dipper in the beginning. We've added dipper in and taken mink out, and a dipper will score 2. So it's, again, I suppose the thing to point out is it's really worth spending a little bit of time on site, 10 minutes or so, just quietly observing and waiting to see if any of this stuff turns up, and also try and make sure that if you see one of the species on the list, make sure you tick the box rather than write it in the notes, because as you can see on any of these, we don't really have the ability on a big scale to interpret what you see in the other very rigorously. So there's a chance that other problem plant species or other wildlife spotted will get a -1 or a +1 score. And on average that will work out well. But if you are seeing a water vole and mark it in the notes, it might not get, I mean, we'll probably move it, but just as good practice to try and log the things that are the indicator species if you possibly can. We are really interested in finding out all the wildlife you see though, so please don't leave anything out. This is just a quick sort of a glimpse of how we make these scores. So the scores then that I said before, so outfall causing odor is 5 here. So these are the scores. These are each of the surveys. So these are the results. So on this one, so you would have dates down here, and so then we basically top them up, take an average. So I don't know, where's a high one? So you can see the collapsed riverbank is obviously occurring quite often, so 10 times out of however many surveys that is, 59% of the time. That's then, we get a total score divided by the number of surveys to get an average for each item. And that's really useful because then we can see essentially that this one, and I think this was the Abbey River in Hartland, the score that's coming out for pollution is 2.6. And we can see that that's made up mostly of reports of cattle stock access to river and collapsed riverbanks, with a little bit of input from an oily sheen that was seen just on one occasion, plus some road runoff. So you can start to see then how the overall ratings for a site or a catchment are being influenced by these particular sightings. So again, really emphasises the importance of being consistent and hopefully sure of what you're seeing. So again, please do ask us if there's any questions. And this is how that looks again for the ecology. So again, you see that we're getting a negative 1.7 score, and that's largely made up by the Japanese knotweed, which was cited on 59% of the surveys, a little bit of Himalayan balsam, and offset a little bit by the nuns, and another bit of wildlife, but not very much wildlife spotted here at all, actually, just one grey wagtail. So hence that was probably yielding a low score for ecology. So we did that for all the catchments. So these are all the catchments along the top, all the water bodies where we had survey data, and these are the scores for pollution and problem plants and wildlife. And again, it was really useful. This was important for us to kind of sense check that we had the grading system all right. We didn't want everything obviously to come out as excellent, or we didn't want everything to come out as terrible. But at the same time, we didn't want to steer it too much either way. We wanted to kind of go with what we felt were the right scores for different issues, but then if things were turning out one way or the other, maybe moderate it slightly. In the end, I think there was just a couple of sites which were coming out with very high pollution scores that gave us a negative, so we had to, a negative percentage, which didn't work, so we had to tweak those a bit. But you can see here the kind of spread we've got from pollution from sort of D's up through C's and B's with a couple of A's, and then on the problem plants and wildlife, again, I think the lowest we had was a D, and didn't have any A's, but up into the C's and B's. Okay, so this is nearly me, and then I'm going to pass over to Lydia to let you have a look at some of these. Like I said before, it does mean that we need to try and make sure we're consistent, and by all means let us know how we can help do that. It's what I'm hoping to do is start sharing more pictures. So the pictures are really important, I think. If ever you're recording anything that is going to score one of those higher scores, sewage fungus or outfalls, try and get a picture of it, because it really helps us not only be sure that that's what you're seeing, but maybe provide advice on how to fix it, and also to share with others what those things look like, because you can't really see too many examples of those kind of things until, to help us get a hang of it. And this idea of, be quite sure that you are seeing what you're reporting, or you're reporting what you're seeing, and not kind of second guessing what might be going on upstream. You can always go upstream and have a look, and you can always record pollution as a separate survey, maybe without the water quality information. So I suppose that's one other thing that's interesting, is I've always said that there's no real benefit to us poking our probes into things like sewage that we know are polluted. It's horrible, and you can catch diseases, and the data isn't all that useful. We choose the sites now very much to kind of give an overview of the catchment, and if there is a site that's right next to a sewage treatment works, we probably shouldn't be doing our regular sampling there. But by all means, if you suspect a source of pollution or some nefarious activity in the catchment, you can document that on a survey, and just as an observational one. And then we've got the time, date, location, and some photographs, and the box is ticked. It'll still work its way into the classification, but the water quality data won't skew the other stuff. I suppose it also shows the importance of consistent monitoring. So if you're in a group in a catchment where there's several people doing it, I think we're only really looking for 12 sites or 12 surveys per water body to generate a scorecard. In some places we'll have a lot more, and that's great. It just gives us that extra weight of evidence, but also it's just worth you knowing that's how these things are created, because those 12 surveys ideally will be not right in the headwaters, or not solely in the headwaters, and not all collected in July. So we're looking for a bit of a spread wherever we can get it. Yeah, I presented these to the Environment Agency twice last week, both on the Tamar team and the North Devon team, and they were very interested in what we're doing, because in a lot of those catchments, as we saw before, they either don't have a Water Framework Directive classification because they've been sort of removed from WFD, or the data behind those is out of date and a bit sparse, particularly on the water quality side. Well, actually on the other side, on the ecology side as well. So more and more we're talking to the EA about this. They're very interested in working collaboratively with us and you on the monitoring and planning that, how it goes forward. And so I've said to them, if and where you have gaps that you know about, let us know, because we can always put a bit of effort in to recruit people in specific locations. But yeah, I think it was all this work was really spurred on because it's all of a sudden dawned on me, certainly, that a lot of our rivers were completely untested, and I don't think that's helpful for anybody. Okay, so thanks for that. I will now, how do we get rid of that? That one.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention feedback. Do you want to mute yourself, Simon? Yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to mention that we've had a lot of email through on the CSI email because people can't get into Teams, and I just Googled it, and there is an issue with Microsoft Teams at the moment. People are getting error messages when they try to log in. So apologies to those watching the recording that you couldn't see this live, but hopefully it's useful for you, and maybe we can set up, you know, a discussion at another webinar if people want to learn more about it, or please do send us emails as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my presentation quickly. I want to make it fairly short and sweet so you have a chance for any questions that you might have. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Okay, so once we had got the data all sorted and Simon's method had been set up, it was a matter of putting it all together into scorecards. So first of all, like Simon mentioned, we went round the 2020 data, separated it into what the EA class as their different water bodies within the Westcountry area, and then picked out the ones that have 12 or more samples within those water bodies. From a data point of view, obviously you need the more samples the better. So we felt like one sample a month is what we aim for if one person was to sample in that water body, and then obviously if there's multiple people, that will increase the number. So that's what that's our baseline for doing these, and also it's a big body of work as well, and time-wise we just thought it was best to minimise the amount of scorecards we produced. Obviously, coming into 2020, we had the impact of the pandemic, and so we of course were advising no sampling in sometimes during that year. So it's understandable that there's only 25 this year. I say only because it was quite a big body of work, but I'm sure that there will be more from 2021. So that's really exciting and positive, because we already have I think it's over 500 surveys for this year, and last year we had 1,000, just over 1,000 surveys. So we're on track to do much more than we did last year. So as you can see from this map, this is an overall grade for each of the water bodies that we did a scorecard for. So it's fairly well spread out throughout the Westcountry in terms of water bodies that we ended up doing a scorecard for. However, in the grand scheme of all the water bodies within the Westcountry, it's only 25 out of the 854. So we do have a way to go to cover all of this area. But it's nice to see that mostly we got B grades. So there's a few sort of C areas where you might think might need a bit more attention, and one little A in the middle there. So this is what our scorecards have turned out like. So we did a lot of toing and froing about the format that we wanted, the template that we wanted to go for, and a lot of credit has to go to Simon and our colleagues Holly and the rest of the monitoring and EE team and the engagement team, because they all helped us refine this and get the look of it how we wanted it. So hopefully you all CSI volunteers enjoy the format of it, and I've had some nice feedback from those of you that have seen them so far. So what we've tried to go for is to initially give an overview of the catchment or the water body itself, give an overall score. And then, as you can see, that wheel, as Simon was talking about, breaks down into individual components of the CSI survey form, and each of those components is broken down at the bottom there and described. And then on the second page, we look at the summary of the catchment. We look at I picked out a few bits that are notable about the catchment. And also, as Simon said, I have looked at the other category and tried to include that in the wording as well, but it is difficult to go into lots of detail on the other section. And so other is important if you're seeing things you know, outside of what the form or the form constraints, but if you can click the tabs, that's really useful for the data collection and analysis. And then we've graphed up the parameters below there, so you can have a look at how the water quality parameters vary over that year. What we've done with the water quality parameters is we've averaged them per month. So the turbidity is actually taken the 95th percentile, so the scores that scored over 95%, and then the phosphate is the 90th percentile, the temperature and the TDS is the average. So that's because of the fact that you get such variant in score for the turbidity and the phosphate. We then just described at the bottom generically how to use the scorecard, the fact that there, you know, will be gaps from last year, because obviously it's a volunteer programme. We don't, you know, there's an expectation obviously that months may be missed, and certainly with COVID restrictions, months were missed last year. So I just thought I'd run through some lessons we learned, some common mistakes that might be useful for people to pick up now into this year. So one thing we've noticed is that it's common for people to put a slightly different grid reference for each survey, even though the survey site stays the same. And that's partly because you can zoom into that map and you can click where you think it is. Now what happens then is you get on the right there, sorry, is the map where you can see lots of little purple dots in the same sort of area. So they're the same survey site, but they've put slightly different grid references. So they end up coming out as different sites. So it's important for us to know whether it actually is a different site and you move slightly downstream because of an obstruction or because you think it's more important to be downstream. So we need that definition. So one good thing is the copy survey button, and that's a really helpful tool. So if you've not come across that before, that's going on to your old survey, clicking at the top there, copy survey, and it will copy all of the essential details onto a new form, which you then can go down and change any of the variables from the new survey you've done, and that will keep the details such as the location name and the grid reference the same. Obviously, if you have a new site, you create a brand new survey. One thing is we've noticed recently is some of the photos aren't uploading correctly. So a few tips for that is just wait until they've finished uploading, make sure they've turned green. We noticed that iPhone pictures aren't saved in the format that's viable with Cartographer. So with iPhone pictures, you may have to convert them into JPEGs before you upload them to Cartographer. And it's worth checking, going back into your survey or the map and just checking that your photos have uploaded and gone through. And that's pretty easy to do once you've uploaded it. So as Simon mentioned, I won't go through it too much, but just make sure when you're at your site, your observations and your water quality measurements are at the site that you record at, and not what you think is happening upstream. And as Simon mentioned, you can go and take log a visual survey. All you need is the grid reference, time, date, name and location. So something that's come up recently is the fact that the temperature on the TDS meter is taking a long time to stabilise. So I think this is probably because we're getting hotter and hotter days, and the TDS meter does measure the outside ambient temperature. So it will be that temperature when you turn it on. and it will have to take a while once you stick it in your sample for it to stabilize and go down to the temperature of the river. So that might take up to 2 minutes or even more sometimes with these very hot days that we're getting. If it's been in your car or it's been in your bag or your pocket, it will be quite hot. Something you should be aware of is there is a hold button. So if you're finding it difficult to read the screen, you can press the hold and it will keep the reading. You can take it out of the water, have a look and write it down. And when you press the temperature button, you just need to be aware that changes it from degrees C to Fahrenheit as well. So obviously when you turn it on, it's dissolved solids in ppm. Press the temperature once and it turns to degrees C. Press it twice and it's Fahrenheit, and press it again and it's back to dissolved solids. So just so you're aware, there are the Fahrenheit setting on there, which we don't want to record. So something to help you with your surveys, we do have sets of guides. So we have them on the problem plants, the wildlife spotted and the pollution as well. So all these guides are available online, and also please do let us know. You can email the CSI email address and we can send you a copy as well. So they're all available to you if you wish to have them, and that just helps you with the identification of the observation part of the form if needed. We're also looking to develop some videos to help you with this as well. So we're recruiting all of the members of the West Country Rivers Trust team to go out and take videos of the pollution and the wildlife and the plants when they're out and about on field work. So it should be really nice to put that all into a video for you guys to have a look at and help you with your surveys. We also have the survey form guide, which accompanies the survey form and runs through the survey form step by step. So if you have any issues or have any questions, that's a really good guide to go to. And obviously, if there's further questions after that, you can email us on the CSI email. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, please do let us know. I'll just stop presenting. So yes, I know that there's quite a few people that haven't managed to come along to this, but if anyone on the call at the moment has any questions they'd like to ask, then please do go ahead. Oh, Anna, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi there. I just wanted to be clear. So if I wanted a scorecard for our area, which is the Dart catchment, it wasn't on your map that you showed up earlier, presumably because there haven't been enough surveys generated from that catchment. So do we wait until the survey numbers increase for that to sort of register to be available as a scorecard? We just have to wait for the numbers to go up.
Yes, I'm sure there will be one for 2021 for the Dart catchment, because as you say, it just was a matter of numbers for the Dart. I believe that the big sort of recruitment for the Dart happened midway through last year, didn't it? So it probably was the fact that there wasn't quite enough samples in the second half of the year to count towards a scorecard. But yeah, I think, Anna, definitely we're seeing so much interest in the Dart, which is really great. So I'm sure we'll have a scorecard for next year.
So the scorecard is put together at the end of sort of December to be produced once a year, or is it an ongoing thing that's just a sort of a rolling scorecard so that you can see the scores as it goes along?
It's going to be a once a year thing for now, because of the time it takes to process the data. Obviously, that all the data you put on Cartographer comes out to us in raw form, so just an Excel form you know, with true or false. So we then have to process that data. Now we do obviously have the template. Obviously the time that's taken from January to now, really a lot of that time has been spent producing that template that we want.
Yes.
So now we have that template. Hopefully that knocks off maybe a month or so of processing time. Which, you know, may be replaced by the fact that we'll have a lot more scorecards for next year. So it might well be that it comes out around about the same time every year. So if we'll aim for March, April time every year to get those out. But yes, we have to wait till the end of December for all the samples to come in for that year before we process them and produce a scorecard.
Brilliant.
It should be possible. I'm just thinking it should be possible in theory for us to have this kind of automated, so that you know. So we talked to Dave at Cartographer, give him the formulas that we've used to create the scorecards, and you know it could be that something updates that you see when you log in. You know, your current score for this water body is this, or so all those kinds of things are possible. But this was really, you know, it's been really just this first year getting the format decided and the maths worked out behind the back, you know, in the background, and then getting them out, and we'll see how they go down. A lot of what we do with CSI, most of you will have noticed, we try not to change things too drastically at any one point. We kind of evolve the system. Obviously next year we'll also have the obstacles data to feed in, so there'll be a little bit of working out how to do that. But yeah, I'm hopeful that in the fullness of time we'll be able to turn these around automatically.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Anna. I think we have a question about the sharing of the scorecards with parish and district councils. So for us, we most likely will share these scorecards via our usual platforms. So that's on our website, through our comms manager, through our social media. And I'm hoping they'll be available for people to download from our website. Obviously that won't be immediate, that will have to go through Josie, our comms manager, so it might take a bit of time. However, your scorecard that you've been sent, so I've sent everyone who's taken the samples within those scorecards their scorecards. You're very welcome to share those with whoever you wish. So if you have contacts within your district and parish council and you wish those scorecards to go out to your wider community, then by all means do share them, because they're you know, the ownership of those is yours. You know, you're the citizen scientists who have taken that data, and we've produced that for you. So please do use it as you wish.
We're also kind of hopeful that, so not only do these scorecards really help us communicating with people like the Environment Agency and with South West Water or Wessex Water, in terms of, you know, providing them evidence on what the data is all for and what it's going into, but I'm really hoping that it'll help to recruit more volunteers. You know, if you're in a catchment that just fell short of having enough surveys for a scorecard, or if your neighbouring catchment has got one and you want one, then get hold of some friends and get together and you know, just kind of increase the amount of monitoring that we'll do. Like Lydia says, I'm sure there'll be a big upsurge in the number we do next year, and it might be quite good in the next month or so to have a little summary and see where we're at with data collected in each water body, so we know roughly how many might be coming. And if you're teetering on the edge, just to let you know that you're only a couple of samples away from getting a scorecard done. So hopefully we can do that too. But yeah, hopefully it'll be help as a bit of a recruiting tool for the scheme as well.
Is there any other questions? Oh yeah, Sue, got your hand up. Oh, maybe you have to unmute yourself, I think, Sue.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. The chances of actually seeing an otter when you're there doing your survey are quite low. But if we have seen otters in the river at other times, you know, quiet evening or whatever, how do you want us to sort of record that? So we know they're there, lots of people do see them, but not necessarily when we're doing a survey.
Yeah, oh, go on, Simon, you can talk.
I would say, I think the key thing there is, if each sighting comes with a survey, then we can work it out as an average. So if you're so I would say log, and I've said this about pollution events as well, if you see something terrible or something fantastic but you don't have your kit with you, you know, just log the time and date, and then when you get back, maybe add a survey in, especially because we don't mind if all we get is the time and location and otter ticked under wildlife, and you can leave everything else blank if you want. It'll then at least get fed in as an average, you know, as part of the average. So if you go to the stream every day with trying to see an otter, so 365 surveys a year, and you see one on, you know, 10 occasions, then in the sense of the average otter sightings per survey will work out the same as if you went there 12, well, not, you know, similar as if you went there 12 times a year and saw one once. So whereas the flip side is you see an otter once, and then because you've seen one, you record it on all your 12 surveys. Well, then you get a fantastic score for ecology, because we think you see an otter every time. Does that make sense? So I think as long as each sighting comes with its own survey, it doesn't have to be at the same time as a water sample. The things can be analysed differently.
Okay, I mean, it's often a quiet evening stroll where you might be lucky enough to spot one, but it's not when you're down there doing your water quality sampling. No,
quite. And so I think that works for me. If you record that as its own survey, and then just put in the notes, you know, so we don't tell you off for leaving everything blank. If you say, I just recorded this because I saw an otter there last night or whatever, that should work.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, the notes section is really important, actually. So if you do have any sort of observations about your survey, or you want us to check something, the notes section is really good, because obviously we then go through that survey, and if we see you've written in the notes that you want us to check a picture or something of that note, then we know the reason for your survey, or we know the you know, what a question you have, and we can answer that. So please do use the notes section.
I suppose the other thing to mention is about kind of signs, you know, tracks or spraint, or God forbid anal jelly from otters, because, and I've never quite yet worked out how we can fit that kind of breakdown of information on the form, you know. So again, I would put it in the notes, and we'll work on that, I think, for future surveys, future iterations, you know, how we score sightings. There's a couple of issues around, you know, how sure can we be that it's an otter print, not a dog footprint or something, and also are there other groups, so like the wildlife trusts or the sort of the wildlife recording schemes, like ERCSIS and whatever the Devon version is, you know, are they better equipped to record those kind of things, or are there things we can borrow from them, because we are talking to them about how they can use our data. So hopefully, you know, all this data goes in to any different portal and is used by all the people who are interested in it. So yeah, but by all means log those, and it will get a mention, and if we can, we'll squeeze it into the classification.
Yeah, it would be quite nice not to have to report sightings of wildlife like that to the Biological Records Centre as well, for example. But I know that that is quite important, that they have that data for the future for all kinds of reasons. Yeah,
and you know, like I say, we are about to start discussions with them about how our data can go in, because essentially it's the same thing. You know, you've seen an otter at a certain, or a wagtail at a certain location, and I know that they're always desperate for records, and the species that we have picked off on the form are kind of really important indicators, certainly for, you know, river health and wider landscape and habitat health. So it should be a really useful data set for them as well.
Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Okay, well, unless there's any other questions, I think what I'll say to those that are watching the recording, please do email us with any questions you have regarding this webinar, and we're quite happy to answer those. And sorry about the technical difficulties with Teams. I think it's out of our control, or at least I hope it is, and it's the wider Microsoft Teams issues, because I did Google it, so it's actually online, so it's a thing. So thank you very much to those that did manage to come along. I hope you found it informative, and hopefully it gives you motivation to get out and sample lots this year, and hopefully we'll have lots of scorecards to analyse and produce for 2021. And I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll catch you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye everybody.
Thanks. Bye.